This incredible story of transformation begins in one of the school's classrooms. The young man suddenly woke up and realized that he had gone back in time to before his college entrance exams. He shouted and jumped out of his chair, grabbing his hair in horror. He couldn't understand why fate had decided to throw him back in time. This certainly hadn't happened after he entered college. Since ancient times, humanity on the blue planet had suffered from a catastrophe known as the invasion of the secret realms. Sometimes these creatures invaded the human world, some of them possessing enough power to wipe out all of humanity from the face of the earth. To survive, humans developed the monstrous gene system, a special technology that allowed them to implant monster genes into their bodies, awakening powerful combat abilities. Only warriors like these could protect humanity, and because of that, they enjoyed far greater status and privileges than ordinary people. The blue planet had entered an era where strength decided everything, and all else became secondary. But Itan held his head, trying to understand what was happening, unable to believe that he was a high school student again. His classmates started laughing at him, saying that a loser like him shouldn't even dream of getting into college. One of the students, Vanessa, asked with disdain why a loser like him hadn't dropped out yet. Itan looked at her irritably, realizing that no story about a bullied protagonist seemed complete without a witch-like character tormenting him. Judging by the situation, the previous owner of this body hadn't had a good reputation. Itan was stunned. Everything that was happening felt like a misunderstanding, and now he would have to pay for the mistakes of the body's former owner. Suddenly, the teacher announced that the students should prepare, as the genetic modification injection would begin soon, and that they now needed to believe in their own strength. However, there was a hint of irritation in his tone toward Itan, implying that he was not a diligent student. Itan only smiled awkwardly, concluding that this was all some kind of joke, because it wasn't he who had been lazy, but the body's original owner. Now that he had this life, he would correct those mistakes and do everything right. After some time, the students gathered in the genetic injection hall, where the solemn awakening ceremony was taking place. There were countless test tubes filled with the awakening serum, each containing the primary genes of various magical creatures. After receiving the injection, each student would absorb one of the genes at random and awaken the power within themselves. Soon the teacher began calling the students one by one to receive their dose. One after another, the students injected the serum. Although the teacher assured them that everything would be fine, the hall was soon filled with screams of pain. Itan knew that something similar awaited him, but he clenched his teeth, made up his mind, and injected the serum into himself. However, nothing happened. He stood there with his eyes wide open, feeling no change at all. The teacher approached him suspiciously and realized that there was no visible reaction. He wondered if perhaps Itan had received the wrong serum. Then Vanessa burst into loud laughter, walked over and mocked him, saying that a loser like him shouldn't even dream of getting into college. She poked his face with her finger, adding that a warrior without awakening was like a bird without wings, which meant he was definitely doomed. But at that moment, the system suddenly reacted and announced that the protagonist had activated the unique gene of the infinite monster. When Vanessa noticed his sudden movement, she irritably asked what that loser thought he was doing. Itan tried to warn her to step back, but as always, Vanessa ignored him. The next second, the protagonist's body began to tremble as he transformed into a furious, monstrous beast. The surge of energy was so powerful that Vanessa, being the closest, was thrown across the room, and then the shockwave struck the rest of the students. The sudden burst of energy immediately attracted the attention of those who had awakened earlier, including El Joshua, who also noticed what was happening. In that moment, the system informed Itan that he had awakened an A-level gene called the Mad Spring Flame. He was stunned, trying to grasp what was happening, wondering if he had just won the jackpot of this system. Until recently, everyone had considered him a failure, but now the students realized that he might have awakened something monstrously powerful. His aura practically swept everyone around him, especially Vanessa, who only had a level 2 monster awakened. Itan apologized for causing such a commotion, reminding them that he had warned everyone to stay back, but no one listened. Soon after, the loudspeaker announced that The third-year students who had completed their awakening were instructed to report to the testing building. There, they would determine the type of their magical beast and the level of their combat ability. Holographic screens displayed each student's data as they were tested. Now it was Joshua's turn, widely recognized as the best student of the year. He had awakened one of the best third-level bloodlines, the Ice Demon Dragon. Then came the turn of El, who ranked first in the entire province. He awakened a rare fourth-category bloodline, the Underworld Sparrow. At that moment, Itan noticed something strange. All of the students possessed third or fourth category genes, but his was classified as nothing more than a lower class gene. Soon it was his time to be tested. As he walked toward the capsule, a crowd of classmates watched him with admiration, convinced they were witnessing the rise of a future legend. Itan understood perfectly that in this world, strength decided everything. He entered the capsule fully aware of his own power. Behind him, the crowd erupted in applause. But what happened next shocked everyone. Only a basic description appeared on the screen. Itan possessed an unknown beast gene. The classroom fell silent. The students looked at each other, confused and unable to understand what was happening. When the confusion faded, they burst into laughter, calling the protagonist a disgrace, and feeling embarrassed for having admired him. But Itan had expected this result. Deep down, he knew that his combat strength and beast gene were far too unusual. His gene wasn't recognized by the testing system, but a special internal signal was activated, confirming the presence of the infinite monster gene. This meant that, unlike the others, he was capable of collecting countless monster genes and strengthening himself without limits. With this realization, he swore that he would become the king of monsters. Later that day, the awakening ceremony ended and classes were dismissed, but a conversation took place in the teacher's office. The teacher was surprised when Itan announced that he wanted to take some time for self-study and prepare for the college entrance exams. Itan firmly stated that he wanted to improve because he was far behind and now needed to undergo special training. The teacher reminded him that the only way to become a warrior was to enter a university, and that Beijing University was extremely difficult to get into. But Itan assured him that he was ready to do anything in the name of power, because his determination was genuine. A little while later, Itan arrived at the Warrior Center, already aware that his parents' house had been mortgaged for about 600,000 yen. However, before heading into the city, he decided he needed to increase his strength. According to the Monster Gene Project data, each gene started with 1% compatibility, but in Demola's model, the number was 3%. The only logical explanation was that Demola's model had absorbed energy from the awakening serum. Realizing this, Itan concluded that instead of training, he could spend money buying genetic supplements to accelerate his muscular growth. However, the moment he passed through the turnstile and entered the building, he was met with a stunning sight. Warriors with awakened bloodlines were everywhere. After Demola's awakening, Itan had gained a unique sensory ability, a vital magnetic field, and with it he began hearing echoes of bestial blood. All of this awakened within him a battle hunger he could barely contain. After all, Demola was considered the king of all beasts. Suddenly, someone grabbed his shoulder from behind. It turned out to be a warrior who advised him not to stare at people so intensely. She then asked what had brought him to the Warrior Center, and Itan calmly replied that he had come to buy a genetic serum. The girl decided to help, though she was surprised that he was using genetic medicine at such an early stage. Warriors generally waited until their blood reached its developmental limit before using such drugs in order to maximize their effects. At his level, the only version suitable for him was the basic entry-level serum, which cost around 400,000 yen, and that amount terrified him. Fortunately, the girl gave him a business card, a recommendation from an experienced warrior, allowing him to obtain a good discount. In the end, Itam thanked her and moved on, hoping that fate would bring them together again. Now that he finally had some money in his pocket, his hands were full with things to take care of. Afterward, he withdrew part of the money and went to a weapon shop for warriors. Later, in his apartment, he began the recovery process. Ethan injected himself with several doses of the genetic serum and soon felt unbearable pain. When the process ended, Ethan collapsed to the floor, exhausted, realizing that for the first time he had truly experienced what it meant to level up. However, the result was impressive. In just a few minutes, he achieved what others took years to accomplish. The next step was to travel to the secret dimension. These rifts were classified from Class S to Class E, with higher classes containing stronger beasts. Soon, Aitan found himself at the rift and realized that there were fewer people around than he had expected. Perhaps all the valuable resources had been taken long ago. Realizing this, Aitan approached the checkpoint and requested authorization to enter the rift. Without hesitation, he walked toward the shimmering portal. The closer he got, the more excitement welled up inside him. To him, this was the beginning of the path to true greatness, to become the king of all beasts. Aitan ran, leapt, and filled with joy, dove into the glowing rift. Once inside the new dimension, Aitan immediately noticed that the dungeon was divided into 3 stars, Kanlan, Anwei, and Taijin. Although he had seen images of secret worlds in textbooks, seeing them with his own eyes was an entirely different experience. As he admired the landscape, a first-class monster, the saber-toothed rabbit, silently crept up behind him. In the blink of an eye, the creature lunged at him, aiming for his back. However, Aitan sensed its presence the moment it jumped. With lightning speed, he grabbed it by the ears while it was still in the air. A sinister smile crept across his face. He found it amusing that such a foolish creature believed he wouldn't notice it. Activating his vital magnetic field, Aitan effortlessly crushed the rabbit's skull, and then he received his first magic core, the saber-toothed rabbit core, which turned out to be of mediocre quality and worth only a few thousand yen. Aitan realized that collecting too many low-level cores was pointless. It would be better to hunt at least second-level beasts. As he considered this, a corpse-eating demon, a second-category monster, appeared nearby. Aitan drew his sword and charged forward. He remembered from the monster encyclopedia that the creature's back was covered with strong armor, but its abdomen was far less protected. He delivered a precise strike to that exact spot, cutting through the lower carapace and piercing the soft flesh beneath. In response, the monster curled its worm-like body into a ring and spun violently, attacking him with a rotating strike. Sensing the danger, Aitan drove his sword into the ground and activated his martial technique. A powerful wave of energy surged forward and struck the monster directly in the abdomen. However, the attack wasn't enough to kill it. In a fit of rage, the corpse-eating demon spat out several spinning discs. Aitan dodged skillfully, displaying incredible reflexes, but his clothes couldn't withstand the barrage. The fabric tore under the strikes. Aitan cursed, complaining that the suit had been expensive and insulted his troublesome opponent. He realized that with his current strength, he wouldn't be able to defeat it. Without powerful combat techniques, he couldn't unleash even half of his true potential. So, Aitan decided to use his greatest advantage, the power of the Demora bloodline. His physical strength increased dramatically. His hands transformed into a bestial form, with sharp claws and hardened skin. When the corpse-eating demon attacked again with its mouth wide open, Aitan leapt straight at the creature and began tearing it apart from the inside. The monster roared in agony, but within seconds, Aitan broke through its carapace and burst out, ripping a path through its abdomen with his fists. After the transformation completed, he felt intense heat radiating from his body, like a jet engine ready to explode. His short sword was lying on the ground, completely corroded by the monster's venom, the weapon unable to withstand even a battle against a level 2 creature. Then Aitan realized that he was extremely hungry, probably because his body had consumed tremendous energy during the fight. Suddenly, an enticing aroma reached him. The source was the green magic core of the slain monster. Giving in to temptation, Aitan abandoned caution and swallowed the entire green core. It dissolved inside him, and almost immediately, his compatibility level rose from 7% to 7.3%. He was stunned. After spending hundreds of thousands of yen on genetic potions, he had only gained 1%, but this single core had given him a 0.3% increase. Realizing how much money he had wasted, Aitan nearly broke down in frustration. But he chose to turn his disappointment into motivation. That night, he would begin a real hunt. He activated his vital magnetic field, releasing a pulse of energy that allowed him to sense every living creature within a wide radius. After several hours, his compatibility had risen to 9%, but the white cores stopped providing any further increase, so Aitan began selling them. After recalculating his earnings, he discovered he had made around 200,000 yen, but time was passing relentlessly. Only not as the days for the admission exams approached, a team of 6 warriors stood at the entrance of the Class D rift, discussing their strategy to obtain the blood jade flower. Captain Lin calmly pointed behind them and assured the group there was no need for concern. He had already contacted the agency to find a new fighter for their team. The newcomer turned out to be none other than Aitan, who introduced himself under the name Deadslaw, stating that he was a 9th-level combat student. The captain noted that with the strength of a 9th-level combat discipline, the newcomer was formally unqualified for a Class D dungeon, therefore his role would be to observe, watch and learn. The most important thing is that he did not interfere with the others. Aitan agreed without objection. He was satisfied that the responsibilities had been clearly defined beforehand. It was better to avoid unpleasant surprises during the mission. The team then set off and crossed through the portal. According to the tracker, the blood jade flower was located in an oasis. Looking around, Aitan realized that just moments ago they had been in a tropical forest, yet now a vast desert stretched in every direction. At that moment, the driver noticed in the rearview mirror a horde of earth demon rats approaching. Lin ordered a fighter named Hood to handle the problem, and Hood immediately pulled out several throwing daggers. He hurled them with precision at the incoming creatures. As soon as the blades pierced the bodies of the rats, powerful explosions erupted, tearing the monsters apart. Aitan simply watched Hood, noting that he was relentless and capable of imbuing throwing daggers with combat energy, turning them into explosive bombs. After some time, the group reached their destination. They left the vehicle and continued on foot, which puzzled Aitan. There was still a long way to the oasis, so why not keep driving? The captain explained that the monsters in the area were extremely sensitive to sound, and the noise of an engine would immediately reveal their location. As they walked, Lin assigned tasks. He ordered the team to throw a morale grenade to lure out the monster. As for Dudsla, he was to simply stay aside and observe. Aitan shrugged. He was fine with that. The grenade contained monster pheromones, creating the illusion that their territory had been invaded. Such a trick was sure to attract nearby beasts, and, indeed, almost immediately a second-rank earth dragon burst out from the sand, roaring with fury. Meanwhile, at the site where Hood had previously destroyed a horde of earth rats, a man appeared. The stranger picked up one of Hood's daggers and, with sadistic pleasure, ran his tongue along the blade. Back at the oasis, the battle raged on. Captain Lin infused his sword with combat energy and, with mastery and precision, severed the dragon's head. When he landed, the squad members rushed to him, anxiously asking if he was all right. Lin sheathed his sword and replied that he was fine. He just needed to continue the mission. However, suddenly, the monster's massive paw fell on him in a final death spasm. The boys shouted, warning the captain, but it was too late. At that instant, Itan tensed the muscles in his legs and leapt into the air. While still airborne, he unleashed all his energy, firing a hyper ray directly at the monster. The attack was so powerful that the beast didn't stand a chance. The team was stunned. A mere martial arts student had dealt such devastating damage to a second-rank monster. Even the captain couldn't hide his admiration, but Itan seemed unfazed, accepting the attention with indifference. Old Lu then extracted the soul essence from the monster's remains and called everyone over to see it. It looked like a huge fruit, and the man was astonished by its exorbitant value. Lin confirmed the price and added that the battle had been close, but now they would surely be able to locate the blood jade flower. However, Rude suddenly struck him from behind. With a treacherous smile, he said there was no point thinking about that now. The captain would die anyway. Everyone was shocked. No one could believe Rude had betrayed them. Gathering his last strength, Lin tried to counterattack, but Rude instantly retreated. He stepped back beside a large man who had been seen lurking nearby earlier. The brute, named Hopang, lazily explained that Rude was simply fulfilling his purpose, to get rich at the expense of others. Itan, stunned by the situation, asked the team if they knew the man. Hopang answered that he was known as a thief of warriors. Old Lu came to aid Captain Lin, but upon reaching him, he was horrified to discover that the dagger that had pierced the captain's body was poisoned. At that moment, Itan remembered Hood's explosive daggers. It seemed that Hood had embedded tracking data in them, transmitting information about the location of their target. Hood, noticing Itan's gaze, gave him a sinister smile. He mocked him, saying in a derisive tone that the boy didn't seem as stupid as he looked. With the admission exams approaching, he should be sitting in school instead of walking hand in hand with death. Annoyed, Rude threw one of his daggers, declaring that Itan was being far too arrogant. But Itan caught the flying blade between two fingers and simply laughed, thinking that Rude was the one who was overconfident, blinded by his own pride. Realizing it was time to clean up, or, as he put it, take out the trash, Itan prepared himself. Rupeng smiled, finding the young man rather interesting, and ordered Rude to bring him Itan's head. At Rupeng's signal, Rude instantly drew several daggers and hurled them at the protagonist with incredible speed. But the boy roared, and the shockwave from his roar shattered the explosive daggers in midair. At that exact moment, Rude vanished from sight. In an instant, he appeared right above Itan, and the team shouted, warning the protagonist to be careful. Itan then raised two fingers to his forehead and commented that it was a good moment to try out a new move. He fired a beam of energy that pierced through the enemy's defenses and punctured his chest. The group stood slack-jawed as Itan knocked out Rude with a single strike, wondering whether this guy was truly a novice. Rupeng was impressed by Itan's unusual genetic technique and suspiciously asked which clan he belonged to. With a dark tone, Itan answered that he was from the clan of Mola, then mockingly asked Rupeng if he was planning to beg for mercy now. Rupeng growled, called him an upstart, and declared that even with genetic technology, Itan could never overcome the colossal difference between them. With those words, Rupeng activated his bloodline, the Black Tyrant Bear. As his massive shadow loomed over Itan, the giant unleashed his combat technique. Itan ducked and fired his beam at the opponent's legs, causing Hopeng to release a beast-like roar of pain, though he still remained standing. Then Hopeng clenched his fists and delivered a blow with incredible force. At the moment of impact, Itan was already in the air. He noted that second-rank fighters were truly impressive. His fiery breath could not even pierce or melt the enemy's bones. When Rupeng leapt into the air again, his enormous palms slammed together, generating a powerful shockwave. But Itan had predicted this. He dodged and instantly appeared behind Rupeng. Realizing the tables had turned, Rupeng's eyes widened as Itan activated another technique. His hands grew in size and filled with combat energy. A barrage of strikes like a tsunami crashed down upon his enemy. Rupeng was completely defenseless, unable to dodge. When the dust settled, Itan stood over the mutilated body of his opponent, which was covered in countless wounds. The team members were frozen in horror, unable to utter a single word. Gasping for breath, Hopeng whispered that the protagonist's technique released poisonous gas, and that such a vile warrior would surely be punished. But Itan looked down at him with cold disdain, his aura flaring with renewed vigor. He struck his opponent again, and the battle came to an end. 9 days passed, and the day of the admission exams finally arrived. The ENS trial was held at the Central Sports Stadium. The host welcomed everyone present, especially the students, as the annual recruitment process for the advanced martial arts schools had officially begun. The exams followed a tournament format, with candidates fighting in pairs and winners advancing to the next round. The trials lasted 3 days. The first 2 were dedicated to qualification battles, and the third day was for those who made it to the advanced stage. In the first arena, 2 boys were fighting. In the fourth, a boy faced a girl. However, the situation in the sixth arena was unusual. One contender was alone, and their opponent had not appeared. The announcer noted that the match was supposed to be between Vanessa and Atan, but only Vanessa was in the arena. Vanessa remembered how he humiliated her at the conference. She intended to regain her honor, but the one she wanted to defeat hadn't even shown up for the match. The crowd began murmuring in discontent, whispering that it was disgraceful, that the participant was so pathetic that he was even afraid to take the admission exam. At that moment, the referee brought the whistle to his lips and was about to announce that time had run out and that the student from the first school of Anya had failed to appear. However, before he could finish speaking, a powerful energy suddenly swept through the arena. People looked up, astonished, as something approached the sixth arena like a meteor. At first, no one understood what it was. Then the figure crashed into the center of the arena, the shockwave of the landing so strong that the platform trembled. When the dust settled, Vanessa hadn't had time to process anything. Before, a second later, her face was just a few centimeters away from the sole of a shoe flying directly toward her. She had no time to dodge and was instantly knocked out of the arena by the powerful strike. Itan simply remarked with irritation that he had managed to arrive literally at the last second. Otherwise, he would have had to wait an entire year for the next exam. The referee, stunned by the sudden result, loudly announced that Itan was the winner, and the crowd erupted in excitement. Itan gave a proud smirk, enjoying the attention, all thanks to Captain Lin, who had given him the blood jade fruit. After defeating Vanessa, Itan continued his winning streak, first facing a student from N City 4th Middle School, then another participant from the same school. All 3 matches ended the same way. The crowd went wild. People shouted his name, and some even gave him the nickname Van Kick Man. As expected, the host solemnly proclaimed that Itan, a student of first high end, had won 3 consecutive matches and would now advance to the 3rd round. Immediately, a crowd gathered around the protagonist in the stands, and journalists scrambled to ask him which university he dreamed of attending. Hearing their questions, Itan smiled with a proud, slightly sinister expression. He confidently declared that his goal was Ruwadu University. Upon hearing this, the crowd dispersed quickly, most of them thinking he was excessively self-confident. But Itan knew that strength was everything. He could already imagine the expressions on their faces when he claimed first place. At that moment, the examiners who had been observing his battles approached him and offered to reassess his combat level. After a quick evaluation, one of them took notice. Just 15 days earlier, Itan had been listed as a 3rd-level combat discipline, and now he had reached the 9th. Then they asked why he had risked his life in such dangerous places right before the exam. He calmly answered that he did it to find himself. Itan had traveled to secret worlds where he fought and broke through his genetic barriers. When the examiners heard this, they were stunned. One of them said he needed to report it to management immediately. In the waiting room, Itan checked his phone and was surprised to see how many live streams were being broadcast. Journalists interviewed parents and friends of the candidates. Unfortunately, no one had come for him. He was an orphan. No one cared. However, without his knowledge, his homeroom teacher was cheering for him with all his strength at home, fists clenched tightly in front of the screen. Itan then entered the arena again. This time, his opponent was Huang from the 3rd secondary school of the city. Huang was an 8th-level warrior with the bloodline of a rare 2nd-rank monster, and both his parents were fighters. Itan looked at Huang with an indifferent expression and suggested that he make the first move. Feeling mocked, Huang became furious. He activated his bloodline power and used a combat technique, accelerating to his maximum speed. His attack cut through the air, heading straight for the protagonist's face. But to his shock, when the claw was about to touch its target, Itan effortlessly caught his hand. Coldly, he commented that Huang's speed wasn't bad, but he was still far behind Huang. Without hesitation, Itan struck his head with his palm, the instant burst of force knocking Huang unconscious right there in the arena. Itan then challenged the arena, asking whether there was any opponent worthy of him, or if everyone else was the same. The announcer declared another one-hit victory. This time, Itan had taken down the seated player Huang. The live stream was flooded with comments, spectators excitedly typing that Huang's intimidating appearance had been defeated in a fraction of a second. Everyone acknowledged that the protagonist's strength clearly surpassed that of the other contestants. Joshua watched as Huang was carried off the stage by medics and smiled because everything was going exactly as he had hoped. The boy he had set his eyes on from the beginning turned out to be exactly what he expected. At that moment, the head of the admissions department at Ruado University ordered that all information about this student be delivered to him within half an hour. After the protagonist's match ended, the second phase of the qualifying battles began, and this fight promised to be even more spectacular. One of the fighters, Kai from Unsecond Secondary School, noticed that she could not bear the cold, emotionless expressions on the faces of the Liu family. They showed no reaction at all. She simply offered a slight bow and calmly greeted her opponent. Moments later, the referee signaled the start of the match. Tsai instantly appeared in front of Liu and delivered a swift kick aimed at her neck. However, Liu did not move in the slightest. She simply lifted her hand gently, and the air around her became viscous. When Tsai's foot reached the area in front of Liu, it felt as if her kick had struck nothing but thick air. Irritated by Liu's calm expression, serene before her opponent, she increased the pressure. She wrapped her body in battle energy and, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, finally hit the side of her opponent with the palm of her hand. But just as her hand came within a few centimeters of L's waist, the movement stopped abruptly. Realizing she was trapped, Tsai tried to pull her hand back, but the air exploded into a powerful vortex that prevented her from retreating. In that instant, Tsai launched another attack, extending her fingers, which glowed with a jade-green light. The spectators watching the live stream immediately recognized the movement as the martial technique Huang Huang. Knowing this was her last chance, Kai activated her bloodline power, the Shadow Tiger King. The examiners in the stands held their breath as they witnessed the process. A royal-level bloodline was extremely rare and notoriously difficult to control. However, Tsai insisted that Kai demonstrate the power of the Phoenix. She finally spoke, saying that it was already enough. Kai, furious beyond reason, screamed, demanding whether Tsai truly believed someone below the level of a warrior could compete with her. Her palm strike sliced through the air toward L, but L's technique steadily weakened her opponent's strength. Realizing that her attack had failed, Tsai gathered the last of her energy and delivered another kick. Then she activated the technique again. Her jade finger collided with Kai's furious strike, and the two powerful forces merged in a blinding explosion. The arena, specially reinforced for battles, could not withstand it. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and a cloud of dust swallowed the arena. The audience held their breath, waiting for the outcome. When the dust finally settled, Tsai was the first to emerge, her body covered in dirt and bruises. Suddenly she staggered and collapsed, unable to stand. L remained calm after completely defeating an opponent of equal level using nothing but technique. Her victory instantly went viral on the live stream, with viewers racing to comment on L's incredible strength. After several more rounds of selection, the 8 finalists were chosen. Itan was the first to draw a lot and pulled a card labeled A. The boy standing beside him drew the same letter and realized they were about to face each other. He introduced himself as Axel from King Fang School. Axel nodded calmly and remarked that they would be fighting in the second match, so they could watch the first one together. The first match would be between Loas of Feng Private School and Joshua of Umph School. Even though Loas had mastered the awakening of his bloodline, he stood no chance against Joshua. The principal of Feng Private School, upon hearing the news, roared in frustration, displeased that his team had lost so quickly. Then the protagonist quietly asked how Loas compared to Axel. Axel replied that Loas was the president of the Martial Arts Association, and that, in terms of combat, not even his two closest comrades could compare to him. Suddenly, Axel looked at the protagonist and admitted that, to be honest, he considered him his main rival in the exam. His intuition had always been particularly sharp, and he sensed something like a dormant volcano lurking inside the protagonist. After that, Axel pointed toward the arena and motioned for them to step onto the stage. Their turn had come. Itan and Axel stood face to face in battle. The announcer proclaimed loudly the second match among the top 8, Axel from Feng Private School versus the protagonist from Umph Secondary School. Moments later, the fists of the two fighters collided with a thunderous impact, sending debris flying and shattering the sturdy platform beneath their feet. A powerful shockwave swept through the hall, deafening the audience and blinding them for an instant. Axel gave a malicious grin. His nose began to bleed, but he felt exhilarated. He had finally found an opponent capable of withstanding his strength. Then he realized the bleeding was caused by the protagonist's ability, an attribute of his bloodline capable of destroying an enemy's cells. Axel acknowledged how incredible the protagonist's technique was, and admitted that he truly was a monster not to be trifled with. Deciding to return the favor, Axel revealed a martial technique passed down in his family for generations. He activated his clan's martial art, the werewolf fist, and then combined it with the horn technique of the... Axel's double strike was so fast that Itan had no time to dodge. His defense shattered, and the blow landed directly on his stomach. The force of the impact hurled Itan backward. He clutched his stomach and spat blood. This was the first time Venkman had suffered such serious damage. But Axel gave him no time to recover, and immediately switched to another technique, the bear ram. His attacks weren't just physical. He infused them with battle energy, doubling the damage. Itan, accustomed to weaker opponents, was not prepared for such overwhelming power. Axel's arm suddenly extended and became flexible, wrapping... Now the protagonist realized he had only been partially correct. Itan had only strengthened his body with combat energy, but he also knew how to block his opponent's energy. Then Axel used his technique, the monkey throw, hurling the protagonist through the air across the arena. Immediately after, he switched to tiger leap, delivering a powerful uppercut while Itan was still airborne. Then he used eagle dive, striking the protagonist as he fell. Itan shouted loudly that he would win this fight no matter what. He crashed into the protagonist, and the impact triggered a blinding flash that blasted debris in all directions. When the dust settled, Axel laughed, certain of his victory. The medics were already preparing to rush in, as the combination of techniques used by the champion of King Feng's school could kill even a normal warrior. But at that moment, Axel felt a monstrous aura behind him. He turned, and his heart plummeted in terror as he saw a gigantic creature with a massive scaled paw and sharp claws emerging from the dust clouds. The protagonist's voice echoed through the noise, praising Axel's strength, but noting that Axel had simply been unfortunate enough to meet him. As a consolation, he added that Axel was the first to witness his true form, the awakening of his bloodline. Axel, drenched in sweat, froze in fear. He had never imagined that in the small city of Un, besides El, there could be another martial arts genius, one with a bloodline. The examiners watching the duel stared in horror at the radiation levels coming off the protagonist. The nuclear radiation was dangerously high. Confronted with these numbers, the committee had no choice but to immediately surround the arena with a barrier of combat energy to prevent radiation leakage. Meanwhile, an excited discussion erupted among the audience. Everyone was astonished and thrilled by the protagonist's bloodline awakening. Itan heard all the chatter, but was not surprised. He understood that creatures like moles simply did not exist on the blue planet. However, Axel's nose began to bleed again, and realizing he wouldn't last much longer, he decided to end the fight as quickly as possible. He activated the awakening of his own bloodline, the golden starred monkey. Then he used the snake strike technique and charged forward. Seeing this, Itan responded with a counterattack carrying destructive power like a lightning bolt. The result was devastating. Axel's left arm was injured, and had he not released his energy in time, the limb would have been destroyed. Itan acknowledged that Axel was indeed an exceptional opponent, but his limits had already been reached, and the outcome of the fight could no longer change. The announcer excitedly declared that in the second match of the quarterfinals, another holder of a third-order royal bloodline had appeared. Axel evaluated his situation. A direct attack now would be pointless, so his only remaining chance was a maneuver. However, Itan warned him not to lose focus. The moment Itan approached, Axel abruptly retreated and activated Serpent Fist. His arm became flexible like a snake's body, coiling around the protagonist's left arm and temporarily restraining him. Taking advantage of the moment, Axel quickly positioned himself behind his opponent. Once there, he leapt into the air and fell with tremendous force. But Itan dodged the devastating strike with ease. Realizing that his attack had failed, Axel retreated sharply, but when he looked up, he saw that Itan had been calmly observing him the entire time. In that instant, the protagonist's aura flared with renewed vigor, and he announced that it was now his turn to attack. Raising his right leg, he instantly closed the distance to Axel and prepared to strike. Before the blow could land, Axel suddenly dropped to his knees and admitted defeat. He surrendered voluntarily, leaving the protagonist stunned. He was prepared to continue the fight, burning with battle spirit, and now he didn't know what to do. He sighed and exhaled a cloud of steam, realizing how incredibly difficult it was to suppress his power. However, according to tournament rules, once a participant admitted defeat, the opponent was forbidden from attacking. The announcer then declared the protagonist the winner, and the audience erupted in applause. That very night, the fight between the protagonist and Axel became the main topic of discussion across all social media platforms. Meanwhile, the principal of King Feng Private School trembled with rage. He had placed all his hopes on Axel after Lucy's defeat, and now he was furious. He did not hide his anger, outraged that Axel could surrender after all the money he had invested in him. Then Axel calmly walked up to the principal and placed his injured hand on the man's shoulder. When the principal asked what he was doing, Axel replied that he simply could not withstand the protagonist's strike and therefore surrendered to avoid worsening his injury. He also promised to repay the school for everything it had done for him, but asked the principal not to threaten him again, since it was clear he was stronger. After an intense dispute, the 4 strongest participants were finally determined: Itan, L, Joshua, and 1 unknown contender. Meanwhile, Principal Ann of the first secondary school was overjoyed and admitted that old L had finally earned a promotion. Next came the semi-final draw, with Itan once again receiving the first position. L received the second position, which meant the two would face each other in a duel, while Joshua would fight the unidentified participant. Thus, the first semi-final battle became an internal duel within Ann's school, considered the fiercest confrontation in the history of the entrance examinations. Many fans believe the advantage was in favor of the goddess El, who possessed 2 royal-level combat techniques simultaneously, and although Itan's bloodline seemed incredibly powerful, most believed he was only a level 4 awakening. Some time passed, and the long-awaited moment finally arrived. The arena was prepared, and the crowd erupted in excitement. Itan and El stepped onto the platform. The referee immediately signaled for the fight to begin. As soon as the match started, a cloud of dust and steam rose around the protagonist, completely enveloping his figure. A thick fog covered the entire arena for a moment, obscuring Elle's vision. When she looked forward, she managed to make out a silhouette through the smoke, one that emitted a terrifying pressure. She composed herself, thinking that she hoped this opponent would be strong enough. The spectators, blinded by the dense steam, could not see what was happening. They saw only blurred outlines and could barely guess where Iton was. The announcer enthusiastically commented on the match, curious to see how the young Lady L would handle Iton, the dark horse of the exam. In reality, Iton had simply entered a state of bloodline awakening to release a cloud of vapor and limit her opponent's vision. He knew she would not take the initiative, which made the situation advantageous for him. The longer the fight dragged on, the more likely he was to fall into a disadvantage. Realizing this, Iton decided to attack first. However, Iton believed that if the enemy attacked, she would be able to use her techniques to defend herself and counterattack. In the last instant, Iton approached her, summoned Demolus' tail, sliced through the air, and delivered a rapid strike from the side. She gasped, realizing that Iton had deceived her completely. She had never encountered an opponent who could switch techniques so abruptly. But Iton had no intention of letting such an opportunity slip away. He quickly chased after her, attacking with incredible speed and power. A moment later, he reached Elle again, who barely managed to stand. The viewers of the live broadcast saw her fall into the protagonist's trap and being pushed into a disadvantage. Some condemned him for his unhonest tactics, while others argued that in a real battle any method was valid. The protagonist's pursuit was so relentless that Elle had almost no chance to escape. Iton had already transformed his right hand into a beast's paw with sharp claws. A moment later, the protagonist's black claws, infused with combat energy, sliced through the air. Fortunately, Elle sensed the danger, dodging the claw strike filled with destructive energy. The claws missed her and exploded behind her as she landed gracefully. But she had no time to catch her breath, because Iton was there again, attacking without pause. He led the assault, unleashing an endless barrage of blows, while blocking wave after wave of her counterattacks. She wondered why he did not seem tired. Despite the pace, his physical strength and endurance appeared monstrous. She had mastered 2 mysterious royal-level martial arts. If she could have used even one of them properly, she might have escaped the protagonist's onslaught, but she could not hold out much longer and would have certainly lost soon. Then she realized there was only one thing left to do: use her trump card. The moment she activated the awakening of her bloodline, Iton, who had already raised his fist to strike, suddenly stepped back. Sparks burst from her body, accompanied by the piercing cry of a bird, and she rose into the sky. The announcer, unable to contain his excitement, exclaimed that the audience was witnessing this legendary awakening with their own very... For the first time, she opened her eyes. Upon awakening, she warned the protagonist that in that state, she would not be able to fully control her powers, and therefore should be more careful. Iton answered with a smile, saying that it was wonderful. It meant he could finally go all out. He added that he hoped she would not disappoint him. A strong gust of wind swept across the arena. In the next instant, she was behind the protagonist, moving so fast that he barely noticed where she was. The girl activated her martial art, the Yujin finger, and in response, Iton instantly turned and activated his technique. Elle's Yujin fingers collided with the protagonist's glowing fist, and a powerful burst of energy erupted at the point of contact. The flash blinded the spectators, and the blast of wind echoed in farthest rows. Both fighters were thrown backwards by the shockwave, but she managed to open her wings, and the wind helped her stabilize, softening the landing. However, a sudden feeling of danger struck her. She saw the vertebrae on her back begin to move one by one, glowing with a blinding blue light. This time the energy did not explode outward. Instead, it gathered, concentrating in her mouth. The space around the protagonist became charged with a terrifying aura. Blue bolts burst from her vertebrae, illuminating the arena with a sinister glow. She froze. She realized the attack would be monstrous. The crowd watched in disbelief as the protagonist's awakened form continued to gather energy. The vertebrae on his back became the source of this destructive force, channeling it gradually toward his mouth. Each vertebra shone with a blue flame, and an atomic-like glow formed between his jaws. Then a bright stream of blue particles erupted from his mouth, a monstrous beam of pure nuclear energy. The blast hit instantly, but the girl did not dodge. Instead, she faced the attack head-on, redirecting most of the energy to the side. She folded her wings around herself completely and activated her hidden awakening ability. At the moment her life hung by a thread, she used the phantom bird feather reflection technique. At the center of the blinding flare was El herself, from whom rays of light burst in every direction, tearing past the boundaries of the arena. The spectators, seeing this, were horrified, certain they would not survive the barrage of reflected beams. However, at that exact moment, the entire arena was enveloped by a golden energy, and all rays directed outward vanished as if dissolved. This shield had been created by the mayor of An City, Juan, who cast a severe glance at the audience. He told everyone to watch carefully, for today was the day the strongest champion in the history of An City would be born. The host excitedly told the crowd how fortunate they were to be under Mayor Juan's protection. Elle looked exhausted and wounded, spitting out a mouthful of fresh blood. Her wings had melted after repelling the attack to the very limit of their ability. Since the day she was born, her family had placed great expectations on her. Under the weight of those expectations, she fought countless battles, striving to uphold her reputation as the eldest daughter of the clan. Outsiders admired her genius and strength, but she herself was indifferent to such titles. She simply followed the path her mother had shown her. Her reserved, expressionless demeanor was nothing more than a protective mask. And now she felt she had reached her limit in this battle against that boy. However, evaluating the current situation, she decided that if everything ended at this moment, no one would suspect that she had intentionally held back. With that in mind, she prepared to pretend she was admitting defeat. Suddenly, she approached Ethan and struck his chest lightly, but to her surprise, he did not dodge. He took the hit directly. Her eyes widened in confusion, wondering why he had not avoided it. He turned to her calmly, noticing that she seemed to have lost her fighting spirit and had been distracted since the beginning of the match. Ethan continued, saying that if she had looked him directly in the eyes even once, she would have known from the start that he intended to win this title fairly. Then, without warning, he unleashed a punch filled with fighting energy, the air whistling violently around it. At that instant, the girl froze in terror. This was nothing like she expected. In desperation, she raised her hands to cover her face, but his fist still slipped past and struck the lower part of her jaw. After that, Ethan sternly warned her that if she valued her reputation, she should stop pretending and fight seriously. But he did not stop there. On the contrary, he advanced and unleashed a flurry of strikes against her, as if trying to forcefully awaken her fighting spirit. She covered her face with her hands, wanting only to quit and let him win, but he forced her to fight for real. No matter how hard she tried to keep her composure, she finally exploded like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed satisfied, because now she was finally beginning to fight. For real. Ash swirled through the air as a massive pair of dark purple wings unfolded. Upon awakening, she looked dazzling and confident as she faced the protagonist. In her heart, only one goal remained, to defeat him. On the other hand, Ethan had finally achieved what he wanted, forcing his opponent to reveal her true form and fight seriously. He realized that he no longer had the right to hold back, so he decided to show his true form as well. It was the protagonist's physical technique that combined the spring gene with a body tempered by qigong. his light nuclear force combat body. With a thunderous explosion, the energy beneath him surged upward, launching him into the sky toward L. However, the sudden attack did not shake the girl. She flapped her wings, gathering currents of air and turning them into a furious whirlwind. The raging storm devastated the entire area, destroying the arena's foundations, but Ethan did not hesitate. He dived fearlessly into the destructive tempest. Seeing this, the girl channeled the explosive power of her blood and activated the bird's cry technique. She opened her mouth and directed the sound straight at the protagonist. The sonic waves distorted the air and surged forward rapidly. If his legendary spring blood were not so pure, his internal organs would have been shredded instantly. It looked like Ethan was doomed, but he simply smiled and, looking at his opponent, said that this time he would not retreat. Then, one by one, the vertebrae on his back began to ignite, glowing intensely. She felt a tremendous pressure, yet did not hesitate. Already familiar with that type of attack, she prepared to face it head-on. In the next second, a blinding blue beam tore across the sky, pouring from the girl's mouth. After using the full potential of the atomic breath, the protagonist's body would not be able to trigger the reaction again for some time. Meanwhile, Elle unleashed her most powerful attack, the real martial art Jade Finger, enhanced with her bird blood energy. Two destructive forces collided, and the clash was inevitable. Outside the arena, the spectators held their breath as the announcer declared that the scale of the battle had exceeded the fighters' control. Still, Mayor Juan decided to intervene, activating his Earth genetic magic. At that exact moment, 3 tall and mighty walls rose beneath his feet, reinforced by his combat energy. In the next instant, the stone walls collapsed, and a blinding multicolored light filled everything around them. As the explosion of energy engulfed the arena, dust and smoke spread across the entire area, obscuring most of the stadium. When the spectators saw the aftermath of the collision, they realized that if the mayor had not intervened, most of them would have been victims of the impact. However, he managed to raise 3 divine earth walls to weaken the combined attacks of the protagonist and Elle, but he hadn't had enough time to fully prepare. Meanwhile, Elle looked extremely exhausted, sitting on the ground with her dark purple wings completely burned away. Despite everything, she refused to give up. She tried to gather strength to stand and continue fighting. But as soon as she attempted to rise, Ethan emerged from the clouds of smoke. He calmly remarked that if she didn't get rid of the nuclear radiation in her body, she would remain debilitated in the future. Elle stayed silent, remembering that her last attack seemed to have struck him accurately, yet he stood before her almost unscathed. Finally, she spoke, trying to understand why he kept forcing her to fight seriously when she herself had not wanted the battle to escalate this far. Yatan crouched down in front of her and looked directly into her eyes. He asked whether she truly didn't want to fight, or if she simply refused to acknowledge her innate competitive nature. She could not answer immediately, but after reflecting on his words and recalling how the duel had unfolded, she realized he was right. Until moments ago, she had thought only about how to win, abandoning her defenses and focusing everything on the attack. Then, surprised, she wondered what had happened to her. She had always hated fighting and wanted to surrender to Yatan as quickly as possible. Her thoughts were interrupted when Yatan placed his hand on her left shoulder. The unexpected touch made her blush. He told her she had been filled with distracting thoughts during the battle, and such hesitation always led to defeat. After that, he used his energy to absorb all the nuclear radiation from her body, then stood up. Yatan added that he considered her the strongest opponent he had ever faced. He expressed hope that if fate allowed them to meet again, next time she would fight with all her strength from the very beginning. These words made her blush even more. At that moment, for the first time, she looked at the protagonist with different eyes. Smoke began to clear, and all the cameras turned toward the center of the arena. After a brief pause to check L's condition, the judge officially declared the protagonist the winner, bringing the first semifinal match to an end. In the next bout, Joshua won without much difficulty and advanced to the final alongside Yatan. The final fight, considered the highlight of the entrance examination for Ann City's Municipal College, would determine who would earn the title of Best Fighter. The audience was ecstatic. The showdown promised to be epic. The underdog Yatan versus the renowned genius Joshua. At the referee's signal, the final battle officially began. Yatan challenged his opponent with a smile, telling him to attack with full strength.